Welcome to the Killer Innovation Show, the longest continuously produced podcast in history. Each week, Phil McKinney brings you the insights and strategies to amplify your creativity and innovation skills. Here's your host, Phil McKinney.
For today's show, we are coming from the bus in Richardson, Texas, for a discussion about innovation in healthcare with Josh Smith from Richardson Methodist Medical Center. In this discussion today, we discuss state-of-the-art innovations in healthcare, consumer devices, the kinds of devices that you can use. And I actually share a story about a friend's son and how a medical device actually saved their life, this consumer device. We also talk about integrated and personalized healthcare and what the future of healthcare looks like and much more. And in fact, including in this discussion today, Josh shares an innovation that he hopes someone will develop, and that someone could be you. So take a listen. Before we jump into this episode, can I ask some favors? First of all, like, share, and follow. Help us tell others about the Killer Innovation Show. Help us spread the word. Help us pay it forward to a larger group of people. And with that, let's jump into today's episode of Killer Innovations. So Josh, I know a lot of doctors in my background, history, family members, etc. But I also know a lot of tech people because of my previous career. But what we're seeing today is this kind of merging of the medical and the technology. The technology on the medical side is becoming so much more important, right? So talk a little bit about where that convergence is really happening today.
It's a convergence between, you've got, physicians who are specialized and trained in healthcare, but now there's a huge technology component behind it that just didn't exist 40 years ago. And so as we get further into it, there's been, the technology has allowed physicians and scientists to explore specialties even further. So now they've, not just as cardiology, but they've been able to dive into, sub-specialties of these areas.
Well, in your case, you're a cardiologist, but you have a specialty in the form of electrophysiology. So explain a little bit about what electrophysiology is for the listeners.
So electrophysiology, just put plainly, is it's the study of the conduction of the heart, right? Because the heart is basically an electrical motor, an electrical system, and it's the study of that electrical system and how to do interventions to try to correct, like people have abnormal heart rhythms and things like that, arrhythmias that can give them trouble and lead to serious conditions such as blood clots and stroke and things like that. But by exploring that, the conduction of the heart, right? If it's beating too fast or irregularly, it can lead to a lot of complications. So now we're able to actually do something about it. Whereas 50 years ago, there wasn't much we could do other than duck your head in a bucket of ice water.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the thing that I've noticed in the medical field, right? I've been doing this some work with some of the specialty hospitals out there on the visions, work about what is the future going to look like. And you look at just the sheer pace of innovation in medical devices and technologies, it's accelerating at such a fast pace. How do you keep up with it?
It's a challenge, and I don't know. I don't know the perfect answer. I mean, we try. I mean, it's a partnership, honestly. Right. There's, you have your frontline, you have your physicians, and then you have, your team, your nurses and your technologists, and everybody's working to try to be the best they can be and take and deliver the best healthcare to the patient. But it's a partnership between us and the people at the companies that design this technology and are able to research it and bring it to market.
Right.
Without that partnership, I mean, we wouldn't be able to keep up at all.
Right. Well, and you see a lot of these activities, the university hospitals, because they have the research side to do their work. And then you've got the device manufacturers, but then it's about changing people's lives, giving them a quality of life that just was not achievable in the past. But it's also kind of bleeding now over into consumer devices, right? So the ability for the consumer to detect, irregular heart rates is right, you're wearing, one of the Apple Watches, and we were talking, before we started the interview about this friend of mine whose son, young adult, 24, 25 years old at the time, got one of those brand new watches. This was probably 4 years ago, and was wearing the watch and kept telling him that he was having some form of a cardiac. I think it was detecting AFib or something. And he just said, "Oh, there's something wrong with the watch. It's a brand new watch. I'm 24 years old. What could be wrong with me?" And his girlfriend finally dragged him into the emergency room, and lo and behold, he had a cardiac issue that had gone undetected. And ultimately, he ended up in intensive care with a valve replacement that saved his life. And so you think about now, but the technology that's in the watch came from bigger devices, ultimately coming from something that was more of something that you would use.
Right, yeah, a simple EKG, which, thousands of those are done on a weekly basis in any hospital around the world, right? But yeah, the availability of the technology, not only to the hospitals and the physicians that are taking care of patients, but yeah, to the consumer, like you said, is it's amazing. And your friend's son, most likely, it would have gone undetected for a very long time. Best case scenario, they'd have caught it on a checkup, but most likely, it would have been until he started having problems when he was an older gentleman.
Well, how many 24-year-olds go in and get their annual physical?
Right. How many? We don't even like doing it, right?
Right.
So, why is he going to do it? Yeah.
Well, and the funny, story I tell, my wife's a nurse. She spent 25 years in NICU.
Mm-hmm.
And people always ask about, well, it's great to have a nurse in the family. I go, it's great until the annual physical.
Right.
Because you can't dodge, weave, avoid it. In fact, she is in the room during the physical.
Yeah,
right?
She wants to know everything.
She wants to know everything.
Exactly.
And in fact, I just did my physical last week, came out with flying colors.
Yeah.
But these devices, and I've seen some of the other ones. I've been I was on the Innovation Advisory Board for Roche Diagnostics.
Okay.
They were working on some new work in type 2 diabetes. I'm not a diabetic, but Roche sent me every one of their test meters, and I had test strips coming out my ears. Right? All my neighbors were like, "Hey, have you got any extra test strips? Because they're expensive."
Right, yeah.
Type of a thing. But I tested myself, 8 times a day, which you're supposed to do if you're a diabetic, just to get the experience. And something is there has to be better technology, and now they've got the tap where you don't have to do the pinprick, and then eventually
you can check it on your phone.
You can check it on your phone, because back then you couldn't even report your number through your phone, because the phone had to be FDA certified as part of the whole path of communication.
Yeah, everything had to
and
be
now
encrypted.
That's all. Finally the FDA is caught up to the 21st century, and now is allowing these. But just in the last decade, just on the couple projects that I've been involved in, the progress is just amazing. We were talking about, though, one of the challenges, though, is the upgrade path.
Yeah.
It's a challenge for hospital systems. I've been working with a number of hospital systems that struggle with getting a device or getting a technology, and then, getting locked in. And how do you get on that upgrade path to keep up with everything?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. To say go from what was the latest and greatest 10 years ago to what is now the latest and greatest, but it's manufactured by a different, partner, a different company that's bringing this to market, and it's definitely difficult. There's a lot of things and hurdles to overcome there. It's kind of once you install that, whether it be software or equipment or whatever, you're kind of married to that company for the long term.
Well, it's not any different though than commercial business, right?
Oh,
They
yeah.
pick a financial system,
Right.
pick an email platform, pick a
Mhm.
collaboration technology.
Yeah.
You're not your chief information officer is not excited about swapping
Right.
that out or having to support 3, 4, 5, and this is just part of the fundamental
Yeah.
challenges. And in fact, the healthcare industry came to myself and my team because where I'm the CEO now at Cable Labs, we are the collaboration for the broadband industry. So everybody
Right.
comes to us and we develop. We don't restrict technologies. We actually build them such that they have open interfaces
Mhm.
so that you can swap out faster. So your cable modem versus your
Yeah.
fiber optics, all of that's all
Mhm.
plug and play. Well, the healthcare industry came to us, it's got to be 8 years ago,
Uh-huh.
to say, help us create the cable labs for healthcare. And we did. It's called the Center for Medical Interoperability. It's headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee, trying to get the hospital systems and the manufacturers to
Yeah.
work together
Right.
to try to standardize some of these things. Now,
Yeah, you've got those challenges that exist. You've got this great technology that can like for a consumer, like a watch, can deliver that information, and it says, hey, I don't know exactly what's going on, but you need to go to the doctor, right? Or you need to be seen by someone who
Right.
knows more than this device can tell you. And then you get into the hospitals, and then, like you've talked about how some technology, like you wear it, but it's actually constantly running, and the security behind that is a big challenge, because you're trying to bring this consumer technology and the healthcare side of it and the FDA, all these parts, and we're all trying to encrypt it and protect information and everybody's privacy and everything. So it is a complicated task, and but like you said, the FDA is kind of catching up to the current times and getting on board with everything. So it's been really fantastic. And one thing that I've noticed is that the availability of information via the internet and the web, of people going out and researching, their own symptoms and things like that. Like, there's a lot of people out there that, maybe they've been undiagnosed, but you shouldn't diagnose yourself, but it can lead you in the right direction, right? And say, hey, okay, maybe I should go see an electrophysiologist or a cardiologist, right? And then what's satisfying in the end is you talk to that patient after they've had their procedure and an intervention. And, before they would get these runs, these palpitations in their heart, right? A really fast heart rate and lightheaded and everything. And they thought that was normal. They thought that you and I and everyone else in the world lived like that, right?
Yep.
And that the only way to make it stop was literally a lady told me, she would duck her head in a bucket of ice water, right? And now she's never has that ever again, right? And I mean, that's life changing, right?
Yeah. Well, look, it is. It's for a lot of people. My mom, in my case, she had severe MS, a number of issues. She would avoid anything to go to the doctor. Going to the doctor was bad news versus, no, they can actually do something and actually change your quality of life. You don't need the ability, and it isn't just the issues of, pharmaceuticals, but really, the ability to get to personalized healthcare eventually, where you can know enough about me as a patient to tailor exactly what I need versus, oh, you fit into this, group of people, therefore I treat everybody in that group the exact same.
Yeah, it's I mean, we're all guilty of that, right? We all don't want to go to the doctor or the dentist or whoever.
Well, I don't know.
Right?
I have a doctor saying he doesn't like going to the doctor.
I'm not a doctor. I'm a registered nurse, but I work with a lot of doctors, and we're all guilty of it. And actually, healthcare people are the worst, about taking care of going.
My wife is in that category.
We're like, oh, we're good. Yeah. In fact, the one thing you don't want to be growing up is a nurse's child, because unless you're like dying, you're not going to the doctor or to the ER, right? But yeah, I mean, it's for me, like, I've been a patient in a cardiac cath lab, right, here at the one that I work at. Some years ago, I was out cutting the grass and had a little awkward sensation. It wasn't pain, it wasn't discomfort, it was just something different, right there, kind of in my chest, right in the middle. And I'm like, what I know about cardiology and then, my dad and stuff like that. I'm like, should I go get it checked? And I'm like, well, let's, take an aspirin and see what happens, and And then I was like, I should go get it checked, right? So then I go down and I get it checked, and lo and behold, I'm 37, 38 years old, and I've got a blockage, and I get 2 stents, and I'm thankful that I went when I did, right? Because the long-term damage to my heart was not done, right? Full recovery and everything, so no serious long-term ramifications. But a lot of people, what we do is we wait, right? And the longer you wait,
exactly,
and I know it's a concern of time and financial and everything to go to the doctor, but if something's going on, it's important that you go get it checked out, because there are things that we can do, and tools that technology and medicine have been able to develop, similar to in electrophysiology, that
right.
have come along, and wearables and all these things that have allowed people to get treatment, and it's life changing. It can be.
Well, like in my case, I've had relatives that have died from medical conditions.
Yeah.
Had they gone to a doctor? But again,
Right.
Previous generations, it was like, no, you don't go to the doctor unless you're like really sick. And I'm just having a little pressure. I'm fine.
That's how my dad was when I was a kid. He was out working, and he worked in the oil field and all that. Anyway, he was out working at the house, on a project, and started having chest pain pretty severe. And this is back in the 80s, right? So back then we didn't have like heart stents back then.
Mm-hmm.
We had little balloons that we can inflate that kind of push the plaque out of the way, but inevitably it falls back in, right? Because there's no structure to keep it out of place. And the evolution of the coronary heart stent over the last, I'd say, 30 years, has been life-changing. And it's changed the landscape of cardiology, and also for all of us, right? I've got 2 of them in my heart, and millions of people around the world do, but it used to be back then, when you go, they could give you some nitroglycerin, to kind of relax
right.
your vasculature, and then they could give you, and then they would try to keep it open with that balloon, and you would be in a cath lab for hours, 6-8 hours, trying to stabilize you, and now we can go in through the use of technology, and fluoroscopy, and the things that have developed over the last 25, 30 years. I've seen some top-notch cardiologists. If it's a routine kind of lesion in your heart, they can be in and out in less than 10 minutes and deploy 1 stent, and you're on your way home that afternoon. Whereas 25, 30 years ago, you're in the hospital for a week.
Well, my dad was. My dad had a severe heart issue. Didn't get diagnosed until he was in his early 40s, and then suffered through it. Right, and this was back in the, starting in the early 70s type of a thing, and they kept doing the balloons and all this kinds of thing. But he'd go in for a procedure. He's in the hospital for 3-4 days before he can get home. And now you're boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
We were. Talking before the interview on, some of the work I was doing up at Mayo. We're talking about this project that Mayo has about the hospital of the future, and et cetera. And I took my wife with me one trip up to the Mayo up in Rochester. And you look at like the research side of these hospitals. Mayo, I've been involved at Stanford, University of Chicago, NIH. In the amount of research going into these new technologies is, it swamps anything going on in Silicon Valley. Everything I always get funny, because of my previous role as the CTO at HP. Everybody thinks all innovation happens at Silicon Valley. You got to be in the Valley. That's the only place that anything real happens. Everything else is not real. Like bogus. Part of why we're sitting here in the new bus. And part of the reason I have the bus is I stop around the country to talk to innovators doing interesting things. There are people who've got interesting views of innovations that can happen anywhere. And in fact, here at Richardson, at Richardson Methodist, you guys are doing, interesting things on the technology side.
Oh, yeah. There's some really amazing things out there. And, in Richardson, like, about 3 years ago, it's 2021 now. About 4 years ago, we launched what's called the TAVR program. Are you familiar with that? Mm-hmm. So TAVR is it's used to be if your aortic valve had aortic stenosis, you had one option: either live with it or have open heart surgery to have that replaced, right? Now, much like a heart stent where we can go in through your groin, we can do the same thing, and we can actually go in and deploy a valve within your native valve, right? And expand it with a balloon, and it opens up, and that structure expands, and the valve immediately starts working, right? And this is just that's amazing to me. I mean, the innovation that is behind that, and the research that's gone into that. I mean, because you went from having an open heart surgery where you were going to be in the hospital for 7 to 10 days, and the problem with the open heart side of it is that the sicker you were, the less likely you were to survive the procedure, right? So you became no longer a candidate. So you just kind of had to live with what you had. And these people, they can't walk upstairs. They just getting up and going to the bathroom is exhausting, right? And now we can go in. It's much lower risk than having a full open heart surgery, and we can go in and deploy this valve, and you can go home in 2 or 3 days, and the quality of life for these people who suffer from this aortic stenosis is dramatically improved, right? I mean, their quality of life improves tenfold. They can go up and down the stairs. They can go to the grocery store. I mean, they may not be out running marathons, but their day-to-day quality of life with their family and their friends, it has improved tremendously.
Well, I've seen that, just in family and friends, right?
Yeah.
When people were before, and like you said before, they don't realize what normal is.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, their condition, which they think is normal,
Right.
goes away, and they see a side of life that they just haven't seen before.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because you think that's your normal. I mean,
Right.
we as humans, I mean, we naturally, that's our homeostasis. That's where we live and breathe, right? So to us, that's normal. But when it changes, you're like, oh, I didn't even know this was possible.
So, one question I always like to ask guests, especially when we're talking about technology, is what innovation do you think you will see in your lifetime that you're excited about, that you would like, Now, I don't think time travel is going to quite get there.
I've got a few of them.
Feel free. Let's go.
Well, a couple things that I know that are coming down the road. One of them is, I believe when we spoke earlier, you have like an implantable pacemaker of some sort, some type of rhythm management device. So that has a battery in it, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So
good for 7 years.
Yes, 7 to 10, depending on activity levels, things like that. So the next evolution in that technology is rechargeable batteries, and it's already underway. I think within the next year to two.
Oh, look, your iPhone, your Android.
Yeah.
Mine here on the bus is lay it down on the puck and recharge it.
Right now, you got to go get that replaced in 10 years. But imagine, I mean, to me, that's really just fascinating that we can put this device in you, and not only is it going to help you live a better, healthier life, but we don't ever have to go in to replace it, right? Because we can recharge it externally, right? Somehow. And I don't know all the ins and outs of that technology yet, but I think that's pretty fascinating. Some other stuff that's coming, which you kind of mentioned this already, was I think, we're going to see, I don't even know the proper terminology, but 3D printed organs and things like that.
And we were talking before the interview started. There's an interview back in the archive at Killer Innovations of an interview I did with Dean Kamen, and he's under contract with the Department of Defense.
Okay,
it's a great interview because Dean goes through kind of where it's at, and I've been up to his place up in Manchester, New Hampshire. And he's got like 700 people on staff inventing. He's the inventor of the Segway, not the owner of the Segway that drove off the cliff.
Right.
But he's done that, and peritoneal dialysis and hemodialysis, which is the new machine.
Yeah.
The slingshot. So the Coca-Cola machine, which allows you to pick the flavors. He's the inventor of that. But his big passion project right now is 3D printed organs for organ transplants because of the number of people that don't survive being on the organ transplant list because there are not enough organ donors.
I think that's gonna change the quality of life for the entire world, right? I mean, if that becomes a reality, which I think it will, right? It's just a matter of time.
Well, right now they're making great progress on the first 3D printed pancreas.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it's just mind blowing.
Yeah.
What that's going to be, but yeah, there's one that I can get pretty excited about.
But yeah, there's both of those. I know I'll see those in my lifetime. The third, I mean, we hit on wearables and kind of home health and things like that. But I think that we'll get to a place where a lot of your healthcare, is going to be managed from home. Kind of tailored to you, right? Where I know it's sci-fi movie stuff, but where you go to the bathroom and it says, "Hey, Phil, you're low on this,
right.
Eat some more potassium or vitamin K or whatever it may be, right?" And that's going to be part of your daily routine, right? But you won't even notice it, right? Whereas now you have to go to a doctor or get some blood drawn or a lab or something.
Well, this kind of opens up another quick topic because look, we're going into the second year of COVID.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know about everybody else, but the fact that I can do telehealth appointments with my doctor, it's like, okay, I don't have to drive.
Yeah.
Fit it into a work schedule, have to give myself 30 minutes to drive there, then wait in the waiting room, and then have to drive back. I can just pop into a conference room, get on with my doctor, and other certain things.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's amazing, and that technology was there and it existed. And it was gradually, slowly but surely becoming a thing. But COVID accelerated that and made it embraced much more quicker than. Well,
I think this is another innovation right now. It's going to become standard where you're going to have that combined with some level of standardized medical devices, right?
Yeah.
So like, I'm married to a nurse, right? So we've got the blood pressure cuff and the blood ox, meters and all that kind of stuff. And my doctors always ask for those results. But it'd be nice if there was a standard interface to where everybody bought the same devices, plug it in, and it automatically loads it up into your Epic record. Yeah, and then all of your doctors that are on this, don't get me started on EMRs.
Right.
That's another one of proprietary platform
I was gonna say,
problems.
Talk about proprietary stuff, and that's where a challenge is, right? Like if one, maybe you're from the West Coast and they're using the popular EMR on that side of the country is something different than what we're using here. Like they're not talking to each other, so we don't have access to everything.
And get medical records transferred is a nightmare with HIPAA and forms, and you got to sign. So there's still some barriers to really getting this all together.
I think over time, like you were talking about the hospital of the future or healthcare of the future. I think over time, those barriers will be crossed and overcome. Those are opportunities, I think, and there's a lot of smart people out there that are working on that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Because I'm like you, when I need a copy of my medical records, it is a nightmare, right? I don't care what hospital you're going to or where you're at in the world.
Yep.
It's a challenge.
Yeah,
it takes time out of your day and everything.
You don't have the right form signed, or my wife calls to do it, and it's been more than 12 months since the last form I signed to give her authority to do, and then she can't do it, and then I got to call, it just gets, see, great progress, still some stumbling blocks to really, deliver what I would call an integrated, health plan from the standpoint of having all of your doctors, no matter what systems they're in, all having access to that same piece of information. So,
Oh, I'm sorry, but you were talking about telehealth, and I was just going to throw that out there. And I believe our providers and our insurance companies, they're all on board with that, and so they're working to fix a lot of those issues, right? So no matter if you're seeing your doctor in Florida and you happen to be in New York, that information is shared, right? So it saves money and time and resources on.
Well, I remember everything. Like my father who had severe health problems, right? We literally had to carry this notebook whenever he traveled.
Right.
And it was probably 4.5, 5 inches thick.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because back then, this was, pre-PDFs, right?
Yeah.
So if I put it onto some kind of a hard drive and took it, odds are that hospital system couldn't read those files.
Exactly.
So I had the paper copies, 4.5, 5 inches. And
Oh yeah.
Throw that in the suitcase every time, because invariably we'd be in New York, Cincinnati, back down to the family in Kentucky. Something would go wrong, have to rush him in, and then they go, "What's his medical history?" And you go, chunk, and you drop this.
Yeah, here's the
20-pound notebook.
Here's the Bible
saying,
of Dad.
Here you go. There's Dad.
Here's everything
you
from
ever wanted to know about Dad.
It's a lot of stuff.
Type of thing.
Yeah, it's getting better, and I think people are, the innovators out there that are working on these projects, they're overcoming those hurdles, and they're doing a great job. It's going to take a little bit more time, but we're getting there. I think now with like Epic, you mentioned Epic. They have care everywhere, so if they've been in there somewhere, it doesn't matter where, you can access some of those records.
Yeah.
Right? No matter where.
Well, the problem then now is Epic is just so big that.
Oh yeah.
As a hospital system, you almost don't have a choice because your patients.
I mean, they made a great product, and it really did set a standard.
Yeah.
So kudos to them for that.
Yeah. So one last question. So we talked a little bit about consumer devices. What do you think the next medical consumer device is going to be? I mean, the Apple Watch is great. In fact, I'm waiting for the new one that's going to come out here soon to see what if it's going to have something new and different on it for myself. But because I'm one of those people that don't wear watches. So
I typically don't like them either. But I've kind of been gotten on board with it. The next consumer wearable device, I don't know. I would say possibly in relation to healthcare. Goodness, that's a tough one. There's so many out there. I think it'll be something that integrates what is already out there, right? Kind of like what we're talking about. Integrates the technology that we already have, right? Like you have that phone there. I mean, there's more technology in your phone than there was in the first, rocket that went to the moon, right? So it takes that technology, and like you said, you do your telehealth at home. So something that you can track your stuff at home, and your provider who's doing your visit over phone or video has access to that, right? Like when I did my telehealth visit recently, I just had to tell my doctor. I said, "Hey, my blood pressure was this, my pulse was that. It's been consistent over the last, however long." I had to give them that information, but something that takes all these pieces of information and data that we have, and like you say, integrates it into one system or one easily accessible portal for our providers.
Well, I think also with people aging in place, right? The ability for families to help monitor and help support a family member who may be living remote, aging. They don't want to go into a nursing home facility. And like my wife, she's the nurse in the family. And her parents are now getting up in age in San Diego. They don't live near us. But her ability to get into the medical records and be able to list. She participates in the telehealth appointments so that she can actually talk to the doctors and nurses to understand what their issue is. I think that ability to integrate all of that into one place and being able to, because my dad has to take, my father-in-law has to take his blood pressure, right? And he writes it on a paper log, and then I got to get the paper log to the doctor. Well, nobody has a fax machine. My father-in-law doesn't have a fax machine in their house.
I hate
He doesn't have a scanner. He's 83, right?
.
Plus, trying to use a scanner is complex, and So I think you're right. I think that ability to integrate can really open up some interesting doors.
Yeah, it'll have to be something that can take all these data points that we have that this technology kind of gathers and accumulates for us, right? And makes it. And it has to be something that it's pretty seamless and painless, because the average user isn't going to want to spend 20 minutes or whatever trying to upload their information. It's going to have to be pretty user friendly and not require much from us. But to take those data points and get them into some format that is useful information to your nurses and your doctors and your healthcare system, so that they can actually provide you with what you need, right?
Yeah, it's
because we leave stuff out, right? We forget we forget about it, or we overlook it,
or we assume it's not important.
Right?
And
you
the
think
doctor's
it's not
like,
important.
Well, if you told me that,
Yeah,
I would have, we would have gone down a different path.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah. And we got this tough, particularly.
Yeah.
Certain people, no, I'm fine.
I'm
I got
guilty.
this a little bit, but I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm fine. But, people who've worked for me over the years, they get tired of hearing this term from me. But when you're developing technologies like this, one of the bars I like to set is this has got to be grandma simple.
Exactly.
If your grandmother, if you try to explain your innovation or your idea,
Right.
and your grandma doesn't understand it,
Yeah.
or you build a prototype and your grandma can't use it,
Yes.
and the other term I like to use is, will it play in Iowa? Silicon
right.
Valley is not
Exactly.
normal.
Yes.
Austin, not normal.
Right. Absolutely.
Boulder, Colorado, not normal.
Yeah.
That is not a proxy for the typical user.
Right.
Will this play? Will your grandma on a farm in Iowa be able to use this something to make their life better?
Absolutely. That it's got to be that way. I mean, because that's how you're going to get it out to everybody, and it's going to be utilized by everybody, right? Because if you make it too difficult, I mean, my grandfather, he's 92. He'll walk away from it.
Right.
Like, I don't need that. Right.
So as we wrap up, one, for you, the listener, you just got an idea. If you've got an innovation you want to go build for healthcare, go knock this one out of the park, because you could solve a lot of problems for a lot of people in the healthcare facility. And Josh, I just want to thank you for taking the time, coming on the bus today, and sharing your thoughts on healthcare and technology.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It's been a good time.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah.
So is medical healthcare of interest to you? Is that something that you're interested in innovating? If that's the case, Josh hand-fed you one idea to really solve the bottleneck, the speed bump of getting information sharing in the healthcare industry. And I would encourage you to take a look at that, but also think about just healthcare in general, the role and the impact your ideas, your innovations can have on something that can change quality of life for everybody. Thanks again for joining today's show. I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. We never take your time for granted, and strive to earn that investment of your time in listening to our show each and every week. If you have an idea for an upcoming guest, let me know. Phil at killerinnovations.com. We will always interested in finding guests that have interesting stories. In today's show, we are actually on the road. This is actually one of the first interviews that we are doing in the new bus with the new recording studio. So I'd love to hear your feedback on that as we travel around the country to find innovators who have interesting, compelling stories to help spark those ideas for your own ideas, your own innovations. So the other topic is do you have a question that you would like to have answered? Is there a question that's just nagging you about innovation, creativity, dealing with your management, your boss, about how to get them to fund, whatever it is? Let me know. Love to think about that, putting those into the show and giving you content that you can find useful. Also, help me pay it forward. This show got started back in 2005 as a way to pay it forward to my mentor. He said I could not pay it back to him. I needed to pay it forward, sharing this information, sharing my own career path, my own failings, the challenges I've had, but also the successes I've had, in hopes of equipping you to have your own success. So this is my way of paying it forward. Help me pay it forward by telling others. Let others people know about the show. Share on your social media. Let others know. Pass it around your office amongst your coworkers. Whatever the best way is to let people know, particularly of shows or contents or topics that you found very interesting and compelling. And with that, thanks. We will be back soon with another episode. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Podcasting nonstop since 2005, this has been the Killer Innovation Show on the Innovators Network.